It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Wednesday afternoon. Excuse me. I just got done with the run, and it's a lot hotter than I thought it was outside. But we are here, and about 10 minutes late from when we were originally planning to come on. But regardless, thank you guys for joining us here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, wherever you are watching us. And I got to say that as I get on here for this midweek podcast, I'm just feeling good about the state of Illinois athletics in a way that I don't think I could probably speak to for my entire life. And that is something that, I think we're going to talk kind of in a macro sense about today, because we have the $100 million stadium, or not stadium, but athletic department money coming in from Geese. We have the renaming of the stadium, which admittedly I will talk about as, maybe the only kind of hiccup that I have with this whole thing. But I've kind of gotten over it because $100 million is a lot. So it's a good place to be as an Illini football fan, as an Illini sports fan. And I do think that as we kind of get in this conversation today, it's going to be twofold. It's going to be about the athletic program as a whole. And it's also going to be about the fact that this football program is in a very, very good place right now. And that's exciting. Now, I will say, as I'm on here on this, oh gosh, where's my name is for some reason populating this video board, and I wish it weren't. But this is just technology at its finest. So let's get things going here. There we go. Got the banner going. What happened to my what happened to my thing here? This is very peculiar. It's showing names. I don't want them to show names. That's peculiar. This is really weird, guys. Sorry. So for the video feed, I'm kind of working my way through this. And just give me a second here as I'm doing that. And what I will probably do, if I'm being quite honest with you, is go back to the beginning for the audio portion of this. It's just when you think technology is cooperating with you, it's really not. So we'll probably do a redo with this. Okay, there we go. That's looking better. I don't want my name on here. And then we will actually kick things off. Hide name. Quick style tab, display names. There we go. Style. I don't want display. Yeah, there we go. All right. If you don't mind, guys, you're going to get a false start here. Let's start again. I mean, hey, you're getting a behind the scenes look at running a live podcast. But the beauty is we can just start again. All right. It is the 200 level, Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Wednesday afternoon. And I am basking in the glow of Illini sports in its probably best position that it's been in my life. And that might sound hyperbolic, which I am certainly prone to. But I've been reflecting a bit in the past few days since the Duke win, but really specifically since the news came out yesterday about the Geese $100 million contribution that also includes the naming rights for the stadium, which we'll talk about, and thinking, man, Josh Whitman has accomplished quite a bit here in essentially a decade's worth of time, and a little bit less than that, because if I recall, it would have been November of 2015 when Paul Kowalczyk was the interim athletic director, 10 years ago. And right before the Northwestern season-ending game at Soldier Field, he came out and said, Bill Cubitt is our coach. He went on to say something to the effect that it was not ideal that Bill Cubitt would be retained, but hey, that's kind of the situation given all the administrative upheaval at the University of Illinois. So, fine. Bill Cubitt's coming back. Our football program is not taking itself seriously. Josh Whitman comes in, I think sometime maybe that February, and by March, he hires Lovie Smith. Now, we know that didn't work out. But despite that false start with football, here we are less than a decade into his tenure with a top 10 football program, a top 15 basketball program in the last 7-8 years. If you're looking at their cumulative accomplishments, top 20 for sure. A women's basketball program that was the absolute dredges of the sport that is now pretty damn good. And non-revenue sports, I'm not trying to poo-poo their efforts. I mean, there are some good ones. There are some that are struggling. But I think we would all agree that the overall health and temperature, that if you were to take it out in the parking lots on Saturday for this athletic department, or as high as they've been in a long time. And you'd probably have to go back to the early 80s, and the 80s belonged to the Illini, and probably what it felt like on campus in 1983 when Mike White has that thing cooking and on the way to a Rose Bowl, and Lou Henson is about to make an Elite Eight, but maybe should have been Final Four if not for that bad traveling call at Kentucky. I digress. To be in this position, though, as a fan that had heard all about the 80s belonged to the Illini, and to be staring at a Saturday against a Western Michigan team that in and of itself is not an exciting opponent, and know that I'm going to be in a packed Lot 31 and walking into a packed Memorial Stadium for a non-conference game against Western Michigan is so indicative of how far this thing has come. The $100 million that were donated yesterday by Geese, Larry Geese, is more than a cherry on top. That would be diminishing the amount of money and just the grand gesture that it is. But undoubtedly, it is something that would not have happened if Josh Whitman hadn't had this success as an athletic director. It all comes down to the hires that you make. But the good thing about this with Illinois is you can really trace it back up to the top and say, why are we here in this position? And Josh Whitman has his fingerprints all over this thing. I got to say, on a personal level, when we did interview him a few times at 93.5, he was always very gracious with his time. You know, I appreciated the fact, as an Illini alum myself, that he was someone that was from the university. And while I roll my eyes at the idea of a Michigan man and the way that they can't shut up about it, it is nice to have an Illini guy as, well, not the media company, though they're doing their job, but the athletic director being a former Illini football player in charge of things. You know, that's cool. It's something that I hadn't really experienced. At least I didn't feel that way, or that connection with Ron Gunther. That's a whole other podcast, by the way. So I think that with Josh Whitman yesterday, I don't want to say he was braggadocious, because that would almost make it sound like it was not warranted. But some of the things he said that might have come off like a victory lap are totally warranted. And it is okay for him to puff his chest out a little bit about what they've accomplished over there and what he has helped bring about. The fruits of his labor are things that we all get to enjoy as fans. And I was thinking about Saturday in the game, and we're going to kind of recap some of that and why we felt the way we did while watching it. I was thinking about it and why it felt so good. And it was mostly because while the game by itself is not maybe the most memorable Illini game I've seen, there was something about the way that it unfolded that told me we're in a different place now, mentally speaking. And here's my main point in this opening segment. There is a mental hurdle to clear as an Illini football fan, and it is a very tall hurdle. Whatever is that track and field event, steeplechase, I think, where they have the actual sand and water pits after some of those hurdles. I mean, it's just, imagine, it's not just that, but instead of a regular hurdle, it is a high jump. And this is what we have to do as Illini football fans to get over decades of things not going well. And the bottom falling out, or a bad turnover at the worst possible time, you name it, we've seen it, and we've experienced it. And eventually that just kind of chips away at your psyche and at your ability to enjoy, in a sort of lighthearted way, the way you should be able to enjoy sports, Illini football. So as I'm reflecting on that Duke game and why that second half in particular was such a wild and fun ride, it's because it flew in the face of everything that I had been learning on the job as an Illini football fan. And it said, no, in actuality, the bad thing may not happen to your team. And quite the opposite, the good and the sometimes lucky things will happen to your team. There's no jinx or hex against Illinois football. I have said this for a while, whether it's been on this podcast or 93.5 back in the day. The problem hasn't been a curse or a jinx or a hex. You have not had a head football coach that anybody else has really wanted when it comes down to it. I know that Ron Turner got a job at FIU. He was not wanted after Illinois. He was damaged goods. Ron Zook, same thing. Tim Beckman, same thing. Bill Cubitt was older, so that wasn't going to work either. And Lovey somehow got an NFL job again, but whatever. It helped the Bears get Caleb Williams, but who knows if that's even a good thing. I do think, though, that with Brett Bielema at the helm, that's the first thing, but what he's really kind of shepherded in is a completely different mindset that I so thoroughly enjoy. And I'm not going to go so far as to compare it to the way I felt watching the Yankees in the late 90s. And that was just a murderer's row of teams that won title after title and probably annoyed the heck out of most of you listening or watching this right now. But as a fan of the Yankees and watching my dad as a lifelong fan get to enjoy it again after a few decades or a couple decades of basic mediocrity, there was this feeling when the Yankees in the late 90s would go on the field that they were going to find a way to win. And all of a sudden, while this Illinois football team may not be winning a national title, I do feel like more often than not, when they go on the field, they're going to find a way to win. And that is a really strange place to be as an Illini football fan. So I guess the point here in this opening segment is starting with the acknowledgement of Josh Whitman and what he has brought about with this athletic program, and then trickling down to the three revenue sports and specifically focusing on football, because that's what we'll focus on today. What you have seen is not just an infusion of energy and excitement among the fan base, but you've seen a complete tonal shift in the way that we view our fandom and the way that we view this football program that for so long seemed to hurt us. And now it is not hurting us, and we're actually having fun. We should revel in it. I think we are. I think we'll see that on Saturday for a game that isn't the most intriguing matchup. But I kind of love the fact that Illinois gets to play a Western Michigan team that they're favored by 27 points against. And call it, if you want, a victory lap of sorts. There's a lot of games left to play. This is a long season. This team has far bigger goals than just starting 3-0. But on Saturday, if you're at the stadium, take a second and walk around whatever lot you're in, or really just kind of do a little 360 and look around you. Survey the scene and realize that you are now in the company of other Illini fans at a tailgate for a top 10 football team and a program that seems to have its feet firmly planted in the grounds of sustained success. I've never seen that. I'm almost 40, and in the grand scheme of things, that's still young enough. I don't feel old, but I've seen a few things as a fan. Not as much as the generation before me or my dad, and how much the extra 30-some years that he's seen of futility, from Gary Moeller to Bob Blackman, I guess, was okay. But for Illinois football, when Bob Blackman is okay, that kind of says everything you need to know. But yeah, I am very excited for Saturday. I'm going to wake up, pep in my step, not so much for, hey, this is a big game, but more that, wow, this entire day is sort of a celebration of what you've accomplished so far. And as I ran by the stadium today on this unseasonably warm September afternoon, the Geese Memorial Stadium banners were already up. So prepare to see that there is branding already. And it's not garish or anything like that, but Geese in that name is pretty apparent. It's right there for you. If you are at first a little, because now it's not just Memorial Stadium, it has a name on it. I understand that, because that was the only hiccup that I had with it. But on the other hand, I do view it as a very symbolic gesture from an alumni that said, the time is now. This thing is good enough for me to say, you know what? I'm investing in it. And that says, I think, everything you need to know about how far we've come in a decade. So a very macro start to this episode, the 200 level. And for those watching, you won't get this on the audio portion, but we had a false start because of some technological issues. But now we're back. And I'm as excited heading into a game against a MAC team as an Illini football fan probably could be. Before I get too far ahead of myself, got to remind you guys watching at home or listening wherever you are that you can support the 200 level best by supporting our sponsors. That includes Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits, whether it's a pregame meal or a date night with your significant other. Hamilton Walkers is the best spot in Champaign-Urbana. I appreciate Nathan and the staff over there, always really accommodating when my wife and I go, and we have an anniversary dinner coming up that we're really excited to. It's our annual tradition, but not the only time we go there. We try to get there every couple months or so because it is really just that good. And don't let the fact that it's got amazing food in a scratch kitchen, that means everything's made from scratch, don't let that dissuade you from going thinking that everything's super expensive, because that's not the case. It's actually very reasonable. I mean, you can get a $20 really awesome hamburger with fries. And there's other places in downtown Champaign you can't get that. And I can almost guarantee it's not as good. So that's Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well. Brian, a big Illini fan. And I will say that having worked with him for the last 5 years, I believe, since we got the new house, he has just been excellent to work with. Him and his staff super quick with communication. The prices, State Farm prices, so they are some of the most competitive and frankly lowest that you're going to get for insurance. So we recommend, the Carpenter family highly recommends, State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. It may not feel like it, but you will have to get that furnace check sometime relatively soon. So get that scheduled, get that on the books. 217-841-4728. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. And finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. You can check out a gallery of their work and get a free quote while you're at it on their website at owenbuildersllc.com. I know that Cody and Dogtown and Luke and Owen Builders, all Illini fans. So you aren't just supporting the podcast. Know that you are also not supporting some Hoosier fans or the like. No, you're supporting Illini fans that are local business owners. And that's the other cool thing about this. I mean, even Brian being a State Farm agent, he's a local business owner. That's what all of ours are. And we're a local podcast. Look at us. So shop local, listen local, all that good stuff. Good to see y'all in the feed. We got almost 200 people between YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook right now. And do me a favor, as we're talking, if you have any thoughts on your mind about whether the Geese donation of $100 million of the number 9 ranked Illinois football team, whatever it may be, just general thoughts, how you're feeling, you can drop it in the comment section, and I will make sure to bring it up here, just like this one from Adam. What up, Doe? Hey, Adam. What up? So let's talk about this Illini football team and why in the aftermath of the Duke game, I am more bullish on this thing than maybe even Saturday. I think that hindsight being 2020 might be a bit of a misnomer. I think that hindsight isn't quite that clear because sometimes instantaneous reactions do have a little bit more of an element of truth to them in that you don't have enough time and your memory doesn't have enough time to misremember things or paint a different picture than what actually happened. So if I sit here and say on a Wednesday that what happened on Saturday against Duke was all great and everything's dandy, that would be a lie. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that what we saw against Duke was some sort of indication that this team is just going to rattle off every win all the way en route to a college football playoff. But I do think that when you consider the context of that being a second game, you should be more encouraged than not. And that goes beyond just the final score, which, of course, was a gaudy total where you win 45-19 on the road against an ACC team that I think, despite their messiness, will still find their way to some wins this year. We'll see. I feel pretty good about Manny Diaz and that Duke team coming back here next year because I think there will be some attrition, including Menza probably going to the pros. But I have been thinking about what made me feel most optimistic after Duke. And I think it's this. I think it's depth, which might not be the sexy answer as to why do you think this team actually is in position to have a really good year. But I was thinking about depth. I was even thinking about the 2026 season, which I know is very premature, and how conversations used to revolve around, well, after this guy leaves, who's going to replace him? So take, for example, after Xavier Scott leaves, who's going to replace him? And at the risk of sounding reactionary, now I can say, well, I think Tanner Heckel probably could. Okay, well, what about after Miles Scott? He's a veteran safety and the team captain, all that. Well, we got Mac Resetich. Okay, fine. Gabe Akis and Luke Altmaier, those are two that you probably are not going to replace easily. And your offensive line, especially your tackles, I feel maybe you could say the same thing. But for the most part, the depth that showed up against Duke on a hot Saturday afternoon tells me this thing is probably a little bit different than it was in 2022, where you saw things fall off in November. Now, that does not give that team 3 years ago an excuse for the way that season ended, because I don't think it had to end that way. And I don't think a lack of depth was the only reason they lost to Purdue or Michigan State. I thought those were just straight up sloppy performances. But I'm guessing it played a role. And Brett Bielema probably can't come out and say that. I don't think he did. But I think it's fair to say if there were an explanation, not an excuse, but an explanation as to why that team might have struggled down the stretch, it was a lack of depth and having to play the best guys on the field for more and more snaps. I said early on in this podcast season, so when we start talking about this football team, and then specifically the Duke game when it was going to be a hot day and it was going to be 90 degrees in the afternoon sun in Durham, North Carolina, that maybe depth can be the thing that wins the day for this team. Maybe their ability to run the ball, which took a while, admittedly, or their ability to possess the ball, which they did by a considerable margin against Duke, and being able to keep that defense fresh by playing guys different snap counts and really rotating them in and out, that they would be able to run away with it in the fourth. And it kind of happened. Now, the run game was not good in the first half. It was bad, objectively so, and that is something that we're going to be watching for against Western Michigan to hopefully get those wheels churning before you face Indiana in a primetime game that we're all excited about, and I'll be there, and I'm sure some of you will be too. But I think that this depth that I refer to is most obvious on the defensive side of the ball. And while I don't think this defense is going to be elite, I do think that they can be very good in the context of this team. I think they can serve the role that they need to for what this team needs, which is a defense that for 27 to 28 minutes a game, rotating bodies in there, will be a playmaking defense that keeps things in front of them. Often those two things are mutually exclusive, where if you have a playmaking defense, that aggressiveness is going to set you up for big plays by the other team. I actually think there's a way that Aaron Henry can kind of find an interesting niche here as a defensive coordinator in his third year, and one who I thought called a pretty good game on Saturday. And if I had any nits to pick, they weren't anything too egregious. But I like that this defense went out there and they got takeaways. I thought that Jeremy and Jay Lehman had a very good discussion about this. I don't think you can call a lot of those turnovers lucky. There's the muff punt. Well, guess what? That's luck that smiles upon you every so often. They took advantage of it. But when you look at the strip sacks and you look at the Tanner Heckel interception, and was there a second interception too? Was it Bailey that? 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, 2 strip sacks, I think. That's not luck. That is, as Jeremy and Jay Lehman were talking about, taught. That is trained into these guys. And as Matthew Bailey said, his quote was something along the lines of, laser beams on the ball. My eyes were laser beams on that ball. He was looking specifically to do that, and he did. So that, to me, is very much a sign of a defense that has an identity. And their identity is not going to be the Ryan Walters 2022 thing of you will not score on us. But they can at least, I think, try to match what 2022 did in terms of takeaways, which I know sounds outrageous because that team got a bunch of them. But this team's already on a pretty good clip for that. Will teams be as messy as Duke? Maybe not. But when you have a game wrecker like Gabe Akis, that's good for a few strip sacks over the year. And when you got guys like Matthew Bailey and Xavier Scott, and now a Tanner Heckel making a basketball jump in the air to get an interception, you have a secondary good enough to get those. You haven't even really had the linebackers punch out a fumble yet, and I know that's coming. We'll see if Rosiak plays on Saturday because I know he was dinged up against Duke, but I like what I saw from Malachi Hood and some of the other guys they were rotating in there. So that is kind of cool to see. After the Duke game, the depth that I talk about is most pronounced on defense and their identity of a team that will keep things in front of them and make you go play after play after play until you eventually make a mistake. I know that's not a perfect defensive mindset because there might be a game where the opposing offense does, in fact, take down the field over and over and over. But a lot of teams also shoot themselves in the foot. And this leads me to my second thing I'm most encouraged by. In the heat and in your first road game of the year, and I know it's not the toughest road environment, Illinois didn't make any big mistakes. The Daniel Brown roughing the passer was the closest to it. It was dumb, and it led to what would have been a field goal becoming a touchdown. So that's net minus 4 points for the defense as far as costing you. But I really think that the most impressive thing, in addition to the depth really kind of showing out, was that this Illinois team, and this is the experience probably talking here, was able to play a relatively clean game. I know that there were the offensive line miscues, though not really to the tune of too many penalties or anything like that, but they didn't do anything debilitating as a team on any of those units to put themselves in a real position to lose that game. If someone looked at that box score and they said, well, how did Duke lose this game? They would, of course, point to the turnovers. But while that 5 number stands out, I don't think people are talking about the 0 enough for Illinois. And in fact, have they had a turnover all year? Malik Elzy was close, but he didn't have possession. So that was the right call. That's clean football. And while you were not going to win the turnover battle, +5 in probably any other game this year, do you need to? Because I think that you did all this despite the fact that your offense did not get going until the second half. This leads to a third thing I'm excited about. We can acknowledge that the offense was not very good in the first half because they were not. And it was worrisome. I entered that halftime thinking maybe I think it's a coin flip at halftime. I do. I went inside to get some coffee. My friend was coming over, so I went back out to the garage waiting for him to get over. And I'm just sitting there and kind of pacing a little bit thinking, I don't know. I think Duke is gettable. I know Duke is gettable. But are we just not in our bag today? Are we not really being good enough ourselves? And I felt, or feared, I should say, that it could have turned into that disappointing loss where you say, damn it, man, if you would have just done this, that, or not done this or that, that game was yours. Well, fortunately, that was washed away with the help of a huge Duke mistake when they had 2-8s on the field. But from that moment on, it was foot just pressed firmly on the gas for the next 28 minutes of that game. And offensively, it was one of the most impressive halves that you've seen from Barry Lunny. I thought that last year's game in Nebraska, up to that point, was his best game as a Illini offensive coordinator. I thought he was really good in that game and helped you win it by just really kind of controlling the pace of that game with that unit. I think this half against Duke was his best yet. And I'm excited. Now, if you want to call it, unlocking something or finally figuring out just the right mix for this personnel and the run pass, what kind of runs work a little bit better, and fine. I think early in the season, it's fair to expect the first few halves to be a team kind of feeling itself out. And while Barry Lunny has an offensive line returning and a quarterback and running backs returning, getting those receivers into the groove, I think, was really what unlocked things. Because you saw Luke spread the ball around. And in a way, this is an old cliche. It's the run sets up the pass. Okay, well, I think that's what Barry Lunny intended to do on Saturday, and then Duke took that away from you. And it took some time to transition and adjust, but he did. And then all of a sudden, the pass is setting up the run and getting Duke to the point where they're back on their heels when Hank Beatty comes in for wildcat play. So that was such an encouraging game to me from the offense in the second half, where I think that what we saw that half, while they are not going to be putting up 31 every half the rest of the year, I think we should expect 30-plus points from this team more often than not. I do. I just think that they have enough there, because now that you think, well, wait a second. We got Hank Beatty, who, let's talk about him in a second, appears to be a star. 2 games in, I don't think that's premature with how good he's looked. So you got a guy. But on top of that, you got Justin Bowick saying, hi, I'm red zone target. You got Hudson Clement starting to make plays, including that really big 3rd down and 20 conversion. You have Malik Elzy bouncing back from an almost fumble to 2 really awesome catches. So that's mental fortitude that says, you know what, he's going to be a factor in this. And you have, who am I forgetting there? Colin Dixon finally getting a couple too. I'm not really worried about him. And then you finally get the tight ends involved in this with Cole Rusk with an awesome touchdown catch. So I'm thinking now to myself, we know what the running backs are. The offensive line seemed to figure something out in the second half of the second game. And in previous years, it's often been, I don't know, game 5 or 6. So that's good news. And if we now have figured out kind of the roles that all these wide receivers are going to play, and Luke feels comfortable with really any of them, which he certainly looked comfortable with every single one of them, that is just a bevy of options for Barry Lunny to choose from. And there's Luke Altmaier, who, despite missing some throws in the first half, was awesome. And he's a dude. Don't sleep on the fact that Luke is a dude. And you know that. You've watched him. You love the swagger. I will never forget, down at the Citrus Bowl, we were down at the end zone, I think with the Illinois name in it. And whether that was South, I think it was the South end zone there. But when he found Zachary Franklin for that corner pylon touchdown, and first they called it not a touchdown, they reviewed it. They made it a touchdown. He comes up to the fans right at about the goal line, which is where I was sitting. And he does that like Aaron Rodgers championship belt thing. And I thought, damn, man, this kid, all of a sudden, this timid kid from Mississippi who had all these interceptions just a year prior, in his second season is now full of swagger and earned swagger too. So when I watch him in that second half specifically against Duke, I see a guy that is just uber confident. And yet, not in some sort of Jay Cutler, smoking Jay Cutler way where he's, pulling on cigarettes on the sideline. Not that Jay ever actually did that. And then just slinging it around willy-nilly. He is making the smart, right decision more often than not. And he throws a good ball. And he throws a catchable ball. I remember the first time that Luke played, it was the Toledo game 3 years ago. And I was really excited with the way it looked in the first half. And that game obviously got scary, but there is something about seeing him throw the ball. It just looks nice and easy. And Tommy DeVito had a little bit of that too, though Luke obviously has more arm strength. But it just seems to be a very catchable ball. That his completion percentages would indicate that, but that also indicates the fact he's pretty damn accurate, and that you can count, unlike Caleb Williams, for example, on a couple fingers the missed throws, maybe 3 for Luke against Duke. I want to hit Hank Beatty real quick before I were to forget about him, which I don't think we're going to this season because he's just been so awesome. But I don't see any reason why Hank Beatty won't be that good all year. I don't. If you think about why has he been successful so far this year, it's really simple. He finds the open spot, often in the middle of the field. And when you're playing defenses, that 5 to 7, 8 yard range often will be open in the middle. I think the offensive line with pass protection, after they adjusted against Duke, I think overall that pass protection I'm not really worried about. So I think Luke's going to have that time to find guys. But the great thing about Beatty is you often don't need to wait that long for him to be open. He's pretty efficient at, okay, where's my spot? Go get it. And then Luke, if it's not the primary receiver on that play, it's at least the second guy he's looking at, and he'll just get it to him right away, let Hank do a thing. But it's not just the fact that he's good for those intermediate routes, getting open 5 to 8 yards down the field, and then making yards after the catch, which might be his strength. It's the fact that we've already seen him cut loose against Western Illinois for a deep throw that if Luke would have slightly underthrown it, probably would have been a touchdown. It's the fact that you can utilize him in the backfield. And I know we saw the Wildcat play, but you're going to see jet touch passes and things like that. Not now that I'm just calling that out because I use it often in college football 25 with Hank Beatty in the slot, or 26. But you're going to see other things throughout the year gradually towards Hank Beatty in a way that you probably did with Isaiah Williams. I don't know how you compare the two necessarily. I do think that Hank Beatty, though, this sticks. Like what you're seeing. And does that mean 120 yards every game? No. Does that mean he's going to be really good all year? I think so. I mean, what's the reason he can't? He's undersized? Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. When you're that fast and athletic, it doesn't matter. And he's a tough son of a bitch too, man. I love the tats, by the way. I mean, this kid from downstate Illinois with the sleeves. Hey, Rocket Man. And I also love the narratives behind this. It is such a tailor-made football story for the downstate guy that committed to this program, along with Caden Fagan. And who is the other downstate guy? Oh, boy. Why am I forgetting? Well, it's a big one, I know. So I apologize for the one that I am forgetting. But that Hank Beatty, who as early or as late, I should say, as a few games into last year, had a couple of a couple drops, if I recall. And I forget if he had a fumble or maybe just Mac Resetich on one of the punts. But it is just a remarkable turn in such a short amount of time. But we can't act like this hasn't happened with Brett Bielema as a coach before, where you have a guy that runs a developmental program as much as one can in the NIL era. And all of a sudden, a guy it clicks. And I just don't feel anything fluky about this. He looks too good. He looks too good. And Duke is by no means an elite defense, but they're good enough. And he made them look absolutely foolish. So teams will game plan. They'll try to key on him. And there will be some games where he's a little quieter than others. And that's football. But I think he is, 1,000 yards. He's already got like 300, almost 250. 1,000 yards is right there. He's going to be your punt returner. He's a playmaker. And we're going to see plenty of those this year. The cool thing is that if defenses were to start keying on him, I'm less concerned about, well, what other wide receivers are going to step up. This idea of a wide receiver room by committee, I understand why that would make people leery. And I worried too. And there will be some games this year where that might manifest itself, where you're in a tight game in Indiana, and man, I wish we had a Pat Bryant. That could happen. But I think more often than not, you have enough different types of skilled receivers that each kind of fulfill a role that you can piecemeal this together in a way that maybe I was leery about early this year. 2 games in, is that too grand of a proclamation by me? Maybe. But I do think when you got a quarterback as good as Luke Altmaier, that if there's some guy that can make this collection of wide receivers work, it is probably him. So, yeah, if you haven't been able to tell, I'm optimistic. I feel great. Why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't you? That Duke game was, I think, a B minus. Like, for this team, what they could do, I think it was a B minus. It was an A second half, no doubter, right? But I don't know, first half a C? Fine, we'll give him a B overall. I think that's fair. But for that to be a B performance for this team and you to win by that margin on the road, well, guess what? If we got rid of that turnover differential, Illinois would have found a way to win. It would have been closer, would have taken them pulling away late in the fourth quarter maybe, but you will have games when this team really starts to get rolling, I feel like, where that turnover differential won't be necessary, and that you will see, if you got both units operating at a B-plus level, if not an A level, that they can get to those 10 wins. They can. Now, you got some consequential games coming up, and I probably shouldn't do this with Western Michigan on the docket, but take care of business. They're better than Western Illinois, of course, because they're an FBS school and they're in the MAC, and that's not FCS in the, is it Ohio Valley, OVC? They are better than that, but they are one of the worst teams in FBS. And this is a game where you should be able to do really whatever the hell you want. And that is, I think, going to give this team license to try things out, to iron out some wrinkles without necessarily getting too experimental or cute, which is a really good way to go into a massive game next week. If you're a Western Michigan fan, I'm not doing this next part of the conversation to disrespect you. I'm only doing it because it's top of mind for a lot of Illini fans, myself included. And that is the Indiana game. Primetime, NBC, red out in Bloomington. Me and 3 friends are going. And it just so happens a friend of mine moved to Bloomington in the last year. So we are maybe, 5-minute drive from the stadium. I was waiting for that game time, hoping beyond hope that please, night game. Like, let's go big. Essentially, Illinois played in this environment last year at Nebraska. And I would imagine that environment was tougher. But this will be a very tough environment. And it will be 60,000 almost Indiana fans clad in red going crazy. Nice, drunk, and loud crowd. And I'm excited for that because I want to be in that crowd, but I'll be wearing orange. And I will probably have had a few drinks as well. And I do not plan on getting in verbal altercations with Indiana fans. I'll just smile, yeah, and enjoy the game. And enjoy it even more if Illinois does what I think they're going to do at Indiana, which is not a shellacking and not a 45-19 win. But I think this schedule, I thought for a while now, man, if they beat Duke, this schedule does kind of set up perfect. As much as I didn't love the idea of going to Duke when you could buy it out and play a scrub at home. And I still sometimes would rather have that. But when you compare the path to that game for Indiana and the path to that game for Illinois, there is no doubt that Illinois will be the better prepared team in terms of facing Power 4 level competition. Western Michigan is not great for prep by themselves. But to do that a week after a win at a Duke team that has some legit Power 4 talent. I mean, they have a few guys that will make the league. And we saw that on their defensive line, and we saw that with their quarterback. Indiana is better than Duke. But is that because of talent? Or is that because they have probably an elite coach? And Cignetti, yep, he's a blustery kind of guy. He doesn't sit well with me either, but I would be foolish to say that he's not a really, really good coach. And if you want to say phenom, that might apply to him. because you don't just come into Indiana of all places and do that in your first year. But all that said, the schedule sets up perfectly for this. And we'll talk more in detail about the Indiana game next week. And they're playing what? Indiana State at home. We won't learn a thing about them. They played 3 scrubs at home. They haven't faced a Gabe Backus. They will not have faced a Luke Altmaier. This is an old Illinois team. And when push comes to shove, in an environment like that, I still like this team. Indiana have a decent number of guys returning, but they have some new guys as well. And this is going to be a game with the red out and all the pomp and circumstance. On one hand, that can be exciting. On the other, if like the Nebraska game last year, if you find a way to just get an early score or a big play in the second quarter, whatever it may be, you can turn that crowd kind of against itself. Bear in mind, this Indiana crowd booed them in the first week, in the first quarter against Old Dominion, which makes you think, where the hell do you get off? You're Indiana football. You are in no position to boo a coach that just won 10 games for you, but they did. I'm just saying, that's a little too big for their britches already. And if things turn in that game, that is not going to be a friendly atmosphere. Certainly not for us wearing orange, and that's okay. I will wear that and take whatever verbal slop comes my way. But I just think from the preparation angle to the fact that you are an old team, to the fact that sometimes those highly anticipated games, when you wait all day for the big home game, that can come back and bite you. That said, what is the spread going to be for that game? I see we're jumping the gun here. We're going to talk all about Indiana next week. I really like the way the schedule's shaking out. I really do. And if you merely split Indiana and USC, you're in fantastic shape. If you win both, what do we even talk about on here without everything coming out like it's just absolute hyperbole? Like you thought Carp, and I hate to do third person, is a hyperbolic individual sometimes. If we start 5-0, look out. I'm going to have this shit-eating grin on my face for the whole podcast and be a blithering idiot probably if we start 5-0. So just fair warning. I wanted to get that out there. Before we get out of here, wanted to talk about the Geese $100 million donation. First time I heard of Geese was when they named the business school after him, after another significant donation. But my wife got her master's degree a couple of years ago, and he was the keynote speaker. Actually, now that I think about it, it might have been pre-COVID, so maybe 2019. But he was the commencement speaker. Really good at it, friendly, affable kind of guy. Unassuming kind of guy that you would not guess would be a multi-millionaire. Are we talking billionaire if he can give $100 million check? Regardless, the news came out yesterday, and clearly that was in the works for a long time. And it's hard to wrap your head around a donation like that. Now, I will say, let's get this out of the way. The Geese Memorial Stadium is, understandably, a point of contention for some Illini fans. The idea that you would put a name in front of Memorial Stadium. My initial reaction, and part of the reason I don't really tweet anymore, because initial reactions can sometimes, you kind of renege on those when you think about it, was, oh boy, that's not going to sit well. And how do I feel about it? But as time went on, maybe within 30 minutes, maybe an hour max, I thought, man, if you're paying $100 million, you can put your name on it. Further context, a lot of memorial stadiums in football have a name in front of it. I don't know if any of them have a corporate name. This is not a corporate name. This is a family name. His dad was a veteran. Okay, fine. And they said all the right things at the press conference. Josh Whitman, that is, both from his own perspective and from him paraphrasing things that Geese had said. Geese was not at that press conference, but about the value or how much they value veterans. Okay, that's great. And I believe it, sure. The Geese Memorial Stadium, the name does not bother me. And that is very much a pit in your stomach kind of thing. Like it's either there or it's not. And it doesn't bother me. When I ran by the stadium today, I was actually curious and ran down First Street to see if they would have signage up. Like, would they be plastering things all over the stadium? Well, they did. You won't miss it. There are big banners outside of the stadium with Geese. Is it just for this weekend to kind of rebrand it after the big news? Maybe. Will it stick? Maybe. I don't know. Did it bother me? Nah. No. I'm an Illini sports fan. $100 million for this program. It's almost immeasurable the good that it can do. And what it also may do is open the floodgates. And Whitman alluded to this yesterday. It sort of tells other big donors, it's okay. Like, you can do this too, and you are not putting yourself too far out there when you do so. So I thought, man, name it what you want. Geese Memorial Stadium is not offensive, or I mean, it doesn't bother me. And the mission and the message behind the stadium have not changed. If it were State Farm Stadium, State Farm Memorial Stadium, or Liberty Mutual Emu Bullcrap Memorial Stadium with a freaking emu silhouette, I really hate that thing, then yes, I would have a problem with it, but it's not. So they are doing, I think, a sort of ceremonial thing. They're either Thursday or Friday, late morning. Not a, oh God, what did they call that last year when they reopened the stadium? A rededication, nothing like that, but just a sort of ceremonial thing. And I do think, in terms of the impact it'll have on the stadium, we sit on the west side, and our seats did move with the reseating, but they're still pretty good. So we don't have too many bones to pick. And listen, when your teams get good, the demand goes up and the costs go up. And that's a decision everybody has to make. How much more do you want to put in order to keep your seats or maybe get better ones? And I think we found one that we're happy with, though I will miss some of the people that we sat with over the last few years and kind of got to know. I do feel bad for the very kind lady behind me, because there were a couple times where maybe I'd react to something, I'd stand up, and there was one time during the Michigan game where we missed a field goal or dropped a fourth down completion, and I threw a water bottle, and I think it hit her. It was empty. It was an empty water bottle, but I think it hit her foot because it was out further than I thought. And I thought, God, I'm such an asshole. But we'll miss those people. Well, they miss us. I don't know. But that's part of the territory. That does not bother me. So I just think that for the stadium itself and the improvements it can make, scoreboard, video boards, new sound system, all going to be there next year. Okay, so that's going to be a static difference right away. This is probably going to help fund that. South end zone, there nothing too committal from Josh Whitman about that, but I would imagine that this would help you at least get the ball rolling on some larger stadium initiatives. Is this going to be used for NIL? No, I don't think so, because you already have revenue sharing starting to come in, and you got donors that are kind of exclusively donating for that. And again, does this open the door for other big donors? And I would guess that it would. So it's huge, guys. It's huge. You are not far, if you're not there already, from being a big-time athletic program. I grew up in the Gunther years, and spoiler alert, I'm working on another book, and it's the football version of the basketball one. So it's a companion piece. Like, they're kind of going to be 1-2 punch. Oh boy, and I'm reflecting on the Gunther years, and I'm not fond of them. And I couldn't verbalize it myself then because I was young, but it really lasted with me when Stephen Bardo said on 93.5, and I don't love everything Stephen Bardo does as a color commentator, but when he said that we've operated like the University of East Central Illinois, and it hit me. That's exactly the issue I've been having. We always felt small time, like this old boys club. And no longer. You're operating in every conceivable way like a big boy program. And there's never been a damn good reason why Illinois shouldn't be. I would have moments of frustration back in the day in 93.5 when the football team was sucking ass yet again, or when John Gross is missing tournaments. And I was the so-called angry guy. That anger was coming from a place of we can and should expect better, while also saying I don't need national championships in football. I just want 8 wins. And guess what? As good as this football team is, I'm still at that level. Maybe I'll recalibrate at some point, and I'll be happy to do that, but I'm still at that level. And for basketball, just make tournaments. Well, of course, I've criticized things about Brad Underwood, but he's a very good coach. Despite a few misgivings that I have, I wouldn't trade him for many. So I think what often got misconstrued is that my anger was just for the sake of being angry, but it was really coming from a place of growing up and feeling like, why does my favorite team in my college that I root for feel smaller than some other Big Ten colleagues? It shouldn't. Just because I'm familiar with Champaign-Urbana doesn't mean it's not a great college community, and that the University of Illinois isn't a fantastic university capable of being every bit as good in athletics as some of the other big names. I've been to Ann Arbor. That's a really cool city. And I'm sure as a college environment, probably rivals, if not in some ways surpasses Champaign-Urbana. But I'm sorry, they are not any more deserving of big-time athletics than Illinois. And neither is Ohio State, and certainly not Ohio State. I got a friend who's a Buckeyes fan, but we can all be honest about Ohio. Armpit of America, it is what it is. Columbus, Ohio, as a college town, maybe it's fine. I don't know. But they don't deserve it any more than Illinois fans. No Big Ten team deserves it any more than Illinois fans. And, likewise, Illinois fans don't deserve it any more than others. But we should embrace this. And I think we are as fans. I think we're actually kind of acclimating to this pretty quick, and it's kind of fun to see. We should be okay with, and actually, if not demand, feel as if we have a right to really successful athletics. And that's not a bridge too far. That's not too much to ask for. And to see Illini fans footing the bill in some of these ways and really putting their money where their mouth is with NIL being a thing. I knew when NIL was becoming a thing that Illinois was going to be in a great position. Why? Because we're freaking nuts. And that's a compliment most of the time, occasionally not a compliment. But most of the time, that's a great thing for a college sports fandom. Be absolutely bananas. We are. And then you got a big old fan and an alum in Larry Geese donating $100 million freaking dollars. Guys, we can say it. We are operating like a big boy program, and I might even get rid of that qualifier and pretty soon just say we are a big boy program. And this football season could go a very long way in establishing that. Okay, a couple things before I get out of here. I got a couple comments. This is from Adam Kerr. As it stands, 33% of LZ's career receptions occurred this season. 2 games. If he's our number 4 option, this wide receiver by committee thing has teeth. Good post, Adam. And I was particularly encouraged by his 2 catches after that miss. They didn't bench him. They kept playing him. In a video of the post-game locker room celebration, Bielema specifically mentioned LZ. I think he's a well-respected and liked guy in that locker room. He's got talent. Sometimes it just takes a little bit to unlock it. I think you will see him continue to get targets and catches this year, and maybe more so as the year goes on. From Andy, I'm feeling like if we can get one of Indiana and USC, we have a realistic spot at 10-2. 100%. Andy, if they're 10-2, they're making the CFP. They are. There's no 10-2 Big Ten team that would not. Also from Andy, also not as worried as I would have been in the past about the Indiana game. This team has seen tough environments. Just look at last year, Nebraska and Penn State and Oregon. And both of those, as Andy mentioned, were Nebraska, Penn State were night games. And yeah, I know, Andy, I think it's a great training ground. Last year was ahead of schedule. This team actually took a lot of their lumps last year and finished 10-3. So it's okay to dream big. And the Duke game was validating in a lot of those ways. And even with the missteps, and kind of acknowledging that as the season goes on, you got to clean things up. You got to get better. I don't have any doubt that this older group of guys and this coaching staff have a way to find themselves better each and every week than the game that came before. And Western Michigan won't be really the one that tells the tale fully, but I do think that it's a really good opportunity to clean some of those minor things up. Well, not minor, but clean some of those mechanical things up ahead of the Indiana game. But life is good, guys. Embrace it. I know it's going to be hot outside Saturday, but not humid. So it's going to be kind of that fall, dry as heck air and a hot sun, but it's going to be down by the time the game starts. And that stadium is a beautiful place to be for a night game. Before I get out of here, I got to remind you that the best way to support our podcast is to support our sponsors. And that includes Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits, pregame meal, date night, formal, informal. It works for all those occasions. Best restaurant in Champaign-Urbana, Hamilton Walkers. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. For life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. And I know it's hot now, but you want to get that furnace check scheduled before it's too late. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, 217-841-4728. Finally, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Get a free quote and check out a gallery of their work while you're there at owenbuildersllc.com. Appreciate the sponsors. Again, support them. That helps us. Before you guys get out of here, we got about 250 people across the different platforms. Like, subscribe wherever you're watching, follow. We will be back Sunday for a post-Western Michigan conversation about that game. And then we're going to do this Wednesday afternoon thing for a midweek. But appreciate you guys tuning in as your workday ends. And we are on the right side of Hump Day ahead of a full Saturday of tailgating at Memorial Stadium. So have a good rest of your week, everybody. And whether you're listening to this on the way down to the game or in the lots before the game, I hope that you enjoy Saturday as much as I'm pretty darn sure that I will. Do I say go Illini at the end of a podcast? I don't normally do that, but I will reiterate. Life is good for Illini fans right now, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. We'll see you Sunday after the Illinois-Western Michigan game, and then we'll get ready for a big one at Indiana. It is the 200 level.